Welcome to the Black Paper. My name is Ndụkwe Ọnụọha.
Nwanze.
Nice to see you, Cheta. It's been an interesting week, hasn't it?
Yes, very glad. The week was initially quite quiet for me, and then yesterday it blew up because, for those who don't know, I'm a geopolitical analyst. That's what I do as a day job. And yesterday I had a lot of questions on what the impact of Israel's attack on Iran would be on the countries like Nigeria. So a lot of clients rang up. So I spent a good chunk of yesterday just talking.
Mm.
Yeah.
And
My mouth is paining me.
and for a while, the Nigerian government will be happy because oil prices are going up. What that translates to, well, only God knows.
Well, that's a short-term thing, and
Yeah.
I have to be very careful what I say because my bosses will not be happy if I give away for free what should be paid for. But it's all so for Nigeria, for a country like Nigeria, it will be good for a short while. So it all depends on how long the war goes on for. I think I'll stop at this point.
Yeah, no, you know what? Let's go back to the Black Paper. Guys, welcome to the Black Paper. Today we're going to be talking about an interesting topic. And in fact, when Cheta started, he said his week was quiet and then suddenly blew up. We were almost already certain of what we were going to talk about on this episode. And then
And then on Thursday, it blew up.
it blew up again. So on Thursday, the news broke that a Ghanaian boy, a Ghanaian teenager who had been tricked into moving to Ghana, had won an appeal against his parents. Now, for those who don't know this story, now because the boy he's still a teenager, he's he's a minor, so he's not named. But in March 2024, this boy was taken to Ghana under false pretenses. And I know a lot of African parents know this. Oh, let's travel home. Let's go and see grandpa. Let's go and see grandma. And of course, everyone loves a holiday to another country. So this boy gets on the plane with his parents to Ghana, and he's enrolled in a day school because he gets there and his parents are like, right, this is your new home. You're not coming back with us.
Well, they put him in a boarding school at first, and then so it started in a boarding school, and then he complained about being bullied and all of that stuff. So they changed it to a day school, or they changed it to a day student, but I think still at the same school.
Yes. And in mid 2004, he found legal support and then he brought a case against his parents to the UK High Court. In February 2025, the High Court ruled in favor of the parents, deciding their actions were motivated by love and aimed at keeping him safe. The judge cited risks of harm if he returned to London due to perceived gang involvement. Now, we'll get to that at some point. In June 2025, however, the Court of Appeal overturned the High Court's ruling, citing procedural confusion and insufficient focus on the boy's best interest and welfare. The court acknowledged that the boy was mature enough to make certain decisions about his life. Now, this is another thing we should talk about, because on one hand, you can't name this boy.
It's actually a dilemma.
He's a minor.
You are saying you can't name this boy. I mean, it's the ethical dilemma that a lot of us face. We come from an environment where as much so, for example, in Nigeria, the Lagos state government has for some years passed a law against physical chastisement of children. And I would use that language because that's the language that was used against me. So for the record, shortly after my family moved here, I got into trouble with with social services in Hull for physical chastisement. And what got me off the hook is that I was able to prove conclusively that I did not physically chastise them in the UK. So there was an incident back in Nigeria before the family moved where my kids had been very, very naughty. So I had brought out the kobo. But so somehow they got here, and there was Basically, there was just discussion among kids in class, and my daughter mentioned it, and the next thing, the school guidance counselor and everybody got involved. All of that. They came at it. They came at it and decided before they investigated. They decided that it had happened in the UK, so they were actually threatening to take the kids away from us. But by the time they got deeper into it, they found that no, it hadn't happened. So I was educated on all of that stuff.
You have to take a
Um,
course.
but it's the dilemma. So even here, among the natives here, that dilemma exists. Where does the child's rights end, and where do the parents' rights start? Or do we put it the other way? Where do the parents' rights end, and where do the child's rights start? Now, I'm all for, I completely understand that there are so many parents who, when it comes to things like physical chastisement, are very lazy and would reach out for using I say, first option. And that's wrong. I think it has to be unequivocal that that's wrong. But at the same time, you have this dilemma of, you are saying that these kids are minors and they need care. But at the same time, you are tying the hands of the parents behind their backs. So in this particular case, this boy, his parents were, and Justice Hayden in the first ruling noted the boy was getting involved in gangs. The parents had, in my view, not many good options. They are probably, so I mean, the parents haven't been named either. And I can see why they've not been named, because naming the parents would inadvertently expose the boy's name, which is what they don't, the system does not want to do. So because the parents have not been named, we don't quite know their economic circumstances. Are they able to, do they have options for moving the boy within the UK? Do they have maybe relatives who are willing to take the boy in, or friends who are willing to take the boy in away from um, away from the toxic environment he's clearly imbibing down in London? The second thing that comes out at me is the fact that the boy had I was trying not to use that word, but my English is limited in that respect. I can't think of another word. The boy had the
Audacity.
audacity.
How did I know you were going to that word?
You are Nigerian
The
parents like me, and we
audacity.
grew with Nigerian parents. The boy had the audacity to go, to leave school wherever he was in Ghana, and to go to the British Embassy in Accra, and then gets hooked up with the NGO that is prosecuting the case on his behalf. That actually says a lot to me. It says a lot. This boy is out of control. That's my honest view. This boy is out of control. So that alone, for me, means that the parents actually made the right decision in sending him to Ghana. That's my view. Um, because you have, and the parents, every parent, I like to think, loves their children and wants the best for them. There is it's a frightening statistic. We hear about it quite a bit in the news about young black boys joining gangs in London and then ending up with a knife in their listen. We have seen movies about it.
Look, a few days ago, a few weeks ago, there was this case. A reporter he did some investigation, and there was a case of a 9-year-old, Cheta, a 9-year-old with a knife, saying he was protecting himself,
I
he was
remember that.
kill or be killed. And
Yes.
I'm wondering, a 9-year-old, for goodness sake, it's scary. But the thing is, as you've mentioned, it's mostly young black boys who are being influenced by by the environment they're growing up in. It's a gang culture. It's that thing of, you're a big man now, and it's a big man thing, yeah. So you're going around with knives at 9. What on earth is a child doing with a knife at 9? But the thing again is when you look at the appeal court's ruling, and when you look at the circumstances that these children are growing up under, there's an unfair adultification of these children. So when a boy like that is stopped and searched, it's done not cognizant of the fact that this is a minor, but that this is an adult threat. So it's and whether he likes it or not, this appeal court judge has also lent into that stereotype, because if he's saying yes, he's a minor, but he's mature enough to make his own decisions at 14, you're adultificating this child. And a 2024 report highlighted how Black children are always often perceived as older and less protected during police encounters. So and there's Home Office data that shows that young Black male children aged between 10 and 17 face a stop and search rate of 106 per 1,000, compared to just 27 per 1,000 for their white peers. So when this judge says this boy of 14 is mature enough to make his decisions, he is leaning into that.
He's adultifying the boy.
He's adultifying a child, and it does not help.
Precisely. You've just nailed it. I mean, when I was doing my own research on this, I didn't think of that angle at all. There's this, you've just brought up societal implications. Basically, there's clearly a systemic issue where young Black kids are adultified. It reminds me of the case of the young girl who was accused of bringing cannabis into school just before her mock exams, and was searched by 3 white police women, and it ended up that she didn't have cannabis. She was on her period. The search was very invasive, and it ended up
child Q.
Child Q, yes.
And it turned out that this child, if I'm correct and I'm not mixing up the cases, was I think a special needs child or something like that.
No, I can't remember if she was a special. That was a different.
Okay, that was a different
the Child Q case was, she was actually a bright student. But since that's happened, she basically became emotionally tortured. It basically shattered her.
Yeah.
And her academics have collapsed. She now lives in fear, as it were. So that's a problem, and this is something that must be familiar to every parent in this part of the world, African or Caribbean. Basically, every Black parent. A system that looks at your children and does not accept that they're children. And it's and forgive me, I know that you don't really appreciate this, but I can't but help bring the US into this again, because it's almost as if the British establishment or the British system is taking its cues from the American system, where that trope of the big Black boy. So you see a Black boy who is you look at him and you look at his white friend. They're the same size and all of that, and the system treats the Black boy like he's bigger and more menacing and all of that stuff. That is what, in my view, played into this appeal judgment. How can you say, on the one hand, you cannot name the boy involved for legal reasons because he's a minor, but at the same time you are saying he's old enough to make decisions for himself? 14-year-old is a kid. When I think back to some of the decisions I made as a 14-year-old, in the light of hindsight, those are very bad decisions, or were very bad decisions.
You're going way back. 14, think of even some of the decisions that were made at 20. But the thing is, at 14, you're a child who is just, for lack of a better phrase, you're just discovering the joys of puberty. For instance, you're running on chemicals. There's no thought. So I can. My goodness, I didn't think I'll be as upset as I am talking about this thing, but it's that dual. It's not even dual way of looking at things. It's that idea that there's no basis on which you can make decisions when it comes to certain people. It's almost like you're going on vibes. So yes, he's a minor, but you know what? He's a Black boy, isn't he? So let's adultify him and let's carry on with it. And And this is not, if this was just one case, we can say, okay, well, maybe we're overreaching, or maybe we're overthinking things. But the Independent Office for Police Conduct has found that this just keeps going on. In early 2024, a 16-year-old black teenager was found to have been stopped and searched 6 times in 5 months by the Met, prompting, these Office of Police Conduct investigations. So just think about it. It's like
I
every
think the
month we
first,
have.
if yeah, I think the first question that arises to me immediately is the 6 times that they stopped this boy, did they find anything? So
So
so that immediately is a case of textbook racial profiling.
it is.
And yes, I'm looking at that data from the from gov.uk, and black boys are 4.5 times more likely to be stopped and searched for weapons than white males, than white boys. It's so naturally, knife possession will, if you are 4.5 times more likely to be stopped and searched, then they will find knives more on black boys.
Mm.
It doesn't correlate that black boys carry more knives than white boys. It just means that black boys are stopped and searched a whole lot more. And 4.5 times is more, it's a lot more.
As you say in
Again,
Nigeria, if you look long enough, that's the way you define, you will see
you
them.
will see. I mean, to put it in English for those who may not understand Nigerian pidgin, once you are looking for something and you look for it hard enough, you will find it. It's kind of like a trope that within the NGO world, when the government wants to hang something on someone, for whatever reason, they will find something to hang on the
Mm-hmm.
person. It's a depressing story of I mean, and it highlights one of the big problems or the big issues that experts face. Basically, you are making a lot of sacrifices for a better life for your children, because to a very large extent, and without most people's decision to leave the motherland and migrate to basically very cold countries, it's not because of any other thing but thinking of a better life for their children. And in many respects, I keep saying this again because of the knowledge afforded to me by my day job. Unfortunately, too many countries in the motherland in Africa are they were constructed to be dysfunctional. I think that our original sin as Africans, in the context of the modern world, was the fact that in 1963, the Organization of African Unity decided to keep the colonial borders, the colonial structures. Those colonial structures were not designed to build cohesive societies. So because of that, this is 60 years on, the results are in. These countries are not cohesive. They're not working. So people making this is a very rational decision to leave if you can afford it, get a better life for your children. But then you get to this part of the world and you find that the children are not um, the children are being introduced into a culture that's basically encourages things that would not be encouraged in our part of the world. And I think this is where all that nuance comes in, because there's an argument that some people in my circle make, which is a very valid argument, that oh, if our methods of raising children were so great, why are our society so messed up? Why have we gotten to a point where all of us are trying to run away from our societies? And it's actually a very valid argument. Um, but nevertheless, every society has its good and its bad. And to a large extent, in a society such as the UK, you there's a reason why you have this thing called the postcode lottery, where people basically rush to move to certain postcodes because of the schools in those postcodes.
Yeah.
Again, like many parents, white or black, people make a lot of decisions for their children. Because of their children, they make these decisions with their kids in mind. So you rush to these good postcodes. It immediately brings up the fact or the issue of what about those who cannot afford to move to these good postcodes? So they will be left behind in basically deprived neighborhoods, which have higher knife crime rates for the UK, or gun crime rates for the US. I don't know what the problem is in Canada. So they're left behind in such neighborhoods, and then
With parents working at least two
with
jobs.
with parents working at least two jobs, so they don't have much time to be at home with the kids. The kids now find another family, in quotes, in a gang, and then suddenly you see your child having a completely different moral compass from what you expected or prayed that he would have. And then you decide to use the nuclear option. And I think we all know stories. Part of the considerations before so many of us made the move was, okay, we know we have friends. And this happened a lot in Nigeria, even as far back as when I was growing up. I had classmates in my class in secondary school who had spent the earlier part of their lives in Western countries. And then they were brought back by their parents so that they would grow with discipline.
In
So
fact,
what?
I had quite a few in my secondary school.
Yeah, I had in my own class in secondary school. I had at least six. And this was in my class of 30. We're not talking of the entire in my school. We had so as of my SS1, that's the first year of senior secondary, we had A to F, and each class had 30 students, so that's 880 students. And in my own class, there were about, is it 5 or 6 who had come in, so they joined us in SS1. So they had started secondary school in their new countries, or in the countries that they were already citizens of, but because of behavioral issues that their parents noted, they were sent back to Nigeria to be raised with us. So they finished secondary school with us, and then all of them, with the exception of one person, all the rest went back to do university in their Western country. The other chap started university in Uniben with us, and then but he didn't finish. He went off, I think, when I was in my second year in university. So it's clear that this is something that immigrant parents had noticed decades ago. I was in my teens 3 decades ago. So immigrant parents had noticed these things then, and were doing something about it, what they could do, which is sending these children back. Because, so for example, back to the case that we used to start this, his grandparents were involved. The whole thing was, it started with, let us go and see granddad and grandma. So clearly the parents had discussed with the grandparents, likely in Twi, and then had decided, okay, grandma and grandpa, yes, you are done raising children, you raised us, but we don't want. And so I'm basically bringing out the mindsets, the kind of discussion. We don't want the generations, our descendants, your descendants, to spoil, to go off the wheel. So we will bring them to you to help to provide oversight.
You know, I think what you're imagining is the polite version of that conversation.
Yeah, of course, because we can't do the authentic version on the podcast.
Because I imagine
it would be rude.
Like with this child.
Let's start with the Igbo version.
Like,
and I will not translate that for non-Igbo speakers.
So it's like, look, grandpa, grandma, this child is getting on my last nerves, and the one I've even borrowed to support.
Exactly.
So please help me help this child. We're going to bring him home.
Yeah, I mean, again,
it was a cry for help. You know,
it was a cry for help. It is the nuclear option.
And you know, this brings the argument or the question of when these laws are interpreted, or when these judgments are made. Are people, again, is it because of the subject, but is the spirit of the law, as it were, being interpreted, or is it just a letter? Because when I saw this case for the first time last year, when I saw that this boy had taken his parents to court, I read the story and I understood immediately what had happened. I understood that these parents are in a dilemma. These parents are thinking, they're seeing the trajectory of this boy's life, and they've said to themselves, there are only 2 options going, or 3 options going on here. 1, end up dead. 2, end up locked up. 3, we try to save you by taking you out of this situation. Now, when you think about it, in any other circumstance, let's say a victim of domestic abuse, that person, whoever the abuser is, or the abuse will be taken out of the situation so that it doesn't happen again. Now, if parents have looked at their child and they've said, at 14, these boys,
we can see
we
your
can
trajectory
see it.
clearly.
We can see this trajectory clearly. Let's take this boy out. I understood it immediately, but then they go before the court. There's no cultural nuance. There's no understanding. So see how you said in the beginning you were educated.
I'll tell an anecdote on cultural nuance very quickly, since you use that.
But carry on.
Back to the experience that we had in Hall. The first social worker that they sent to our house to inspect the house after the complaint was an all-white Yorkshire lady who, in my view, was racist, but that's another matter. Now, when this visit happened, I was in Nigeria, and she looked at the buckets that we had and wrote in her report that it was a device for waterboarding the children if they didn't comply. So we kicked up a storm.
What?
I'm serious. We kicked up a storm on that. So the next lady that is sent to look through the house was a white lady, but who was involved, who was married to a Ghanaian. And the moment she saw the bucket, she understood what it was. It's not everybody uses a shower, especially when
saving water bills.
Especially when saving water bills, but especially when the kids are that young. We are obsessed with our kids coming out of the bathroom smelling nice.
Yes.
So she understood immediately. So that cultural nuance is always very, very important. And it's clear that the system does not take that into account. Not at all.
Not at all. All right, Cheta, on that note, let's go for a quick break. And when we come back, we'll look at other angles to this story.
And maybe look at what we wanted to talk about very briefly. Very briefly.
I know you can't wait, but yeah. Welcome back to the Black Paper. My name is Ndụkwe Ọnụọha.
My name is Cheta Nwanze.
In the first half of this episode, we spoke about this boy, Ghana boy. Let's call him Ghana boy. Or
I prefer the football fans than Ghananese.
Ghananese.
I know that the Ghanaians will be happy to hear that.
So this boy sent back to Ghana on the pretext, but by experience that they were just going on a holiday.
I think I want to stop that. I don't like the expression tricked or pretext.
No, but I don't think they would have said to him, "Look, we're taking you back and you're not coming back." He would have.
They definitely would not have. Mm-hmm. I mean, if let's put ourselves in the parents' shoes, and this is something we all know. If you see your child, and he's becoming a John one and becoming a Woody, and you know that he knows that you taking him back to school in Ghana or in Nigeria or in Kenya or wherever would mean that he would be cut off from these things that pleasure him, as it were. He would refuse to go for that trip. I mean, let's put it like this: when myself and my kids went to Nigeria for summer last year, and at the airport, I saw a lot of well, not a lot. Let's say there are two families where the kids were screaming, literally screaming, and it turned out that one of them was a schoolmate, not a classmate, but we had been in Uniben at about the same time. So me and him had a brief discussion. They were just going on holiday. I mean, he would have mentioned to me if the kids were not coming back. But the kids did not want to go on that holiday because they had it in their mind that Africa is a very bad place, that they are shooting people on the streets, that kind of stuff. So they did not want to go. So they were kicking up a fuss in the airport. So I can fully imagine that this particular boy, the parents would have very, very, very logically and correctly inferred that if they told him that, oh, we're going to Ghana and you're going to school there, he would have left the house and not come back home.
Yeah.
So again, it raises the question:
Yeah. So
what else could the parents have done?
look again. I think we're on the same page when we say we understand this action, and we're on the same page. Saying that we're not going to condemn anyone who thinks that this is their only course of action if they have a child who is going off
We don't
the
lose.
ledge. We don't they lost. Maybe
Yeah, we don't they lost.
it
Yeah, we don't
hasn't
they
gotten
lost.
there lastly. So but let's then flip the coin. So now we're speaking as parents, we're speaking of people, as people of a certain generation who understand this nuance without any need to be preached at. But let's look at things from either the boy's point of view, not as an allegedly truant child, but as a British boy born and raised in Britain, 14 years old, who's then transported to Ghana. And before I go there, one of the things that irked me, ticked me off about the article is he's been taken back to Africa. These people
Yeah,
need to learn that Africa is a
Africa is not a
continent.
village.
Yes. It's not anyway, but that's a conversation for another day. But journalists, if you're listening, especially you guys in the Guardian who ought to know better, Africa is a continent. There are different countries in Africa. But going back to the conversation, so
They're 54 for a start,
for
and one country alone, Nigeria, which we both come from, happens to be about the size of Britain and France together. So,
but they don't
yeah,
learn.
I mean, it's to be fair to them, it's the and again, this is going into my field of work very briefly. It's the fault of indicator projection. So in the minds of so many people, Africa is it's about the size of Greenland, whereas in reality, Africa is 14 times the size of Greenland. But let's not do that.
Okay. So again, as I was saying, think about it. You're 14, grown up here all your life, and suddenly you're thrust in Ghana and told you're not coming back. Now, Louis Chudesoke wrote an interesting book called Floating in the Most Peculiar Way, where he explored identity, displacement, and belonging through the eyes of a child who was raised in multiple worlds. He was born in Biafra during the Nigerian Civil War. He was orphaned at a young age, and then he moves to Jamaica and later to Los Angeles. Now he had this thing where
That's a very interesting subject.
yeah,
Actually.
it is.
Because until recently, we didn't have direct links between Nigeria or the area that is Nigeria and Jamaica.
Yeah, but it's quite interesting where he talks about being too African for American, being too American for Jamaica, being too even African as well for Jamaica. So in each world where he sets his foot on, multiple identities fight against each other.
It's a dilemma.
What is there that thing, where this boy is thinking, I'm too Ghanaian, I'm too British for Ghana. And of course he said that he was always being mocked as London boy. And let's be honest, kids can be a menace.
No,
Especially
kids can
teenagers.
kids can be terrible. Because and part of the reason is that kids do not have filters. Um, so yes, there's that emotional impact that must be looked at. So essentially, the child becomes an IDP. And that expression, he's too Ghanaian. So and it's so in many respects, the gangs sort of provide, and this is, I think, this is a larger societal feeling. The gangs have provided a home, as it were, for many of these kids. I can't help but go back to Tupac's song, the Tupac Shakur song, "Dear Mama," where he talked about when he started dealing drugs, and his exact words were, even though they sold drugs, they showed a young brother love. Um, I think it's a very important thing to consider that there is a failure in society when you have a situation where children find love in gangs,
Mm.
and it comes from the fact that A, so when you have that to lean into the Keir Starmer's paraphrasing of Enoch Powell, um, an island of strangers. So many people come to this part of the world. They're not fully accepted, even in cases where they do everything to integrate. They're not fully accepted. So they're already displaced. Their children are not fully accepted, whether it is because of the color of their skin or whatever. So think of, for example, like someone like Ngozi Fulani. I don't know if you remember that case where she was at Buckingham Palace,
Yep.
and they kept asking her, "Where are you from?" And where are you originally from? I mean, come on, she was born and brought up here. She's British. So there's that displacement, which this child does not understand yet. Because as a child, you are still interacting with a very limited society, a very limited portion of society, which he has come to view as his own. But from his parents' perspective, he will still have to grow up and interact with the larger society. And then, of course, having gone sent him back to Ghana, in Ghana, his accent will be different, his mannerisms will be different, and because kids can be cruel, that's all that kind of jibes, fake London boy, and those kind of things will come up. And depending on the constitution of the child, some children will harden up and so like what they used to tell us when we were kids, if they're coming at you, come back at them. So it's a lot of it is ultimately depends on the child in question, how that child reacts to various things happening around him. But at the same time, I think there's the risk calculus is the key thing from the parent's point of view, which again, as I'm sure is very clear, that's the point of view. The parent's point of view is the one that I'm really going with. Parents will weigh things like temporary emotional distress, which is what it is, against lifelong risks, violence, incarceration, and death.
Yeah.
As I think when you have emotional distress on one hand and violence, being sent to prison or being killed on the other, I know the choice that I will take. It is the emotional distress every day of the week and 6 times on Sunday.
And this is also quite interesting because we often hear of the nanny state or accusations of the nanny state. First started with, and this was started in the 60s. Conversations around
the welfare state, which we
smoking.
talked about last week.
But then the idea of the government telling you how to live started with things like speed limits, smoking bans, and today we see it pop up, and people are accusing the government of overreaching. You're telling
the government you
families
can do something about it.
every episode, Cheta. Every episode remind me. So the government is telling the families, individuals, communities how to live. In your case, being told that your bucket is an instrument of water, but
Of torture.
I can't get over that. That's madness.
It was hilarious when I read the report.
But I'm sorry to go off on a tangent here, but the thing is, and I'll bring it back to the legal system and the conversation. But the thing is, you are you, Cheta. For the lack of a better phrase, you're a coconut head, which means you're stubborn. For anyone listening, and I'm sure that some people would have heard coconut and like, oh my God, yeah, said no, please calm down. It's not a racist term. In Nigeria, when we say someone is a coconut head, it means their head is strong. It's hard to crack. They are stubborn. So please get your cultural nuances
think,
right.
those cultural nuances are. So it's actually happened in my wife's place of work. Something that's so someone called a Nigerian called someone with a Caribbean background a coconut head. The Caribbean person only heard the word coconuts, or probably only heard coconuts and did not hear what followed after, and it caused a huge fight. So that was when my wife got to understand that to Caribbeans, coconut means something completely
else.
different.
Yeah, but to go back to that, so you being the coconut head you decided to fight because that is the kind of person you are. You won't take stuff like that lying down, so you will see to its logical conclusion. But what about those who, again, because of their experiences with the system or the stories that they've heard about the system, are thinking, I don't have the power to fight this. I don't have the constitution to fight this. And there's also history behind it. Because if the legal system disproportionately affects people from black backgrounds, from African heritage backgrounds, how do you then make your case against a system, as we have seen in this appeal court, where the judge, whether deliberately or not, adultifies a child? What do you do? Where do you go?
That's a very good question, which I do not have an answer to, very unfortunately. But it's a very, very good question, because, and it is this sense of hopelessness, lack of recourse, that pushes parents to say, okay, the only option left is to send my children back home, send my child back home for quote unquote proper training. And if this case goes in the negative, and I think this is a case that has been followed very, very closely within the expert community. If this case goes, if they overturn that judgment and it goes all the way to the Supreme Court and the boy wins, that option will be taken away from the table. So you'll find parents trapped in, as in literally helplessly watching their children go bad and being unable to do anything about it.
But and that also just brings me, interestingly, to the cases, to the idea of the state picking and choosing who you are or what you are and what you mean to them. So let's say, for some, hypothetically, this case wins, or this boy wins at the Supreme Court. That means they've said to themselves, one, we're raising, or we're choosing how we force you to raise your kid. But again, in a situation where parents are also, are most likely penalized for the actions of their children. So the state, on one hand, has taken away your right as a parent
Your
to discipline,
ability.
your ability to discipline your child. But then they also blame you for when something
For when the child goes wrong.
and you never win. But on the third part is the idea that they've said, okay, this is a British boy. But if he misses a penalty in the finals of UEFA, suddenly he's African. If he's someone um who's coerced, again, as a minor, to join a foreign terrorist organization, suddenly you strip their Britishness. So it's,
Shemama Begon comes to mind.
yeah. So it's the question of, who are you? And does the state decide at whatever point, depending on what the judge has had for breakfast, that you can either be more British than you are Ghanaian, for instance, or you are no longer, depending on just either what the Daily Mail says or what the judge feels. It's a constant dilemma.
Yeah, it's a dilemma, and I think there's another thing that comes, or two other things that immediately come to mind. Still going back to the cultural clash, Western societies tends to be highly individualistic, while and when I say we now, what the British will call black and and minority ethnic, it basically cuts across the whole gamut. African and Asian societies tends to be communal in parenting. So, for example, there was I'm not going to go into the full details because of time, but myself and four of my friends were involved in some very naughty behavior. Funny enough, this was when I was in JS3, so that was when I was 14, so the same age as this boy. And it was my mom's friend who saw us. I was the one that she chased and caught. The other guys got away. But she chased and caught me because I am her friend's son. She flogged me. After flogging me, took me home. My mother flogged me, and both of them waited and reported me to my dad.
My goodness.
But that's so now the
You went
flogging
through the criminal
excessive.
justice system.
Yeah, I went through the entire criminal justice system. The flogging was excessive, I admit. But the key thing here is there was that communal, she felt responsible for me because I am my mom's son, her friend's son, her sister's son. So as far as she was concerned, I am her
You're
son.
her son, definitely.
That communal parenting is something that is missing here.
And this goes into the when you look at the language with which we describe these people. Some will call aunties, but there are people, those you see, and you call them ma. You call them
No,
mommy.
no, no. Think of it. At least I, of course, we both speak Igbo. I have some working knowledge of Edo. I have my wife is Yoruba, so because she and her siblings speak Yoruba a lot around me, I pick up quite a bit of Yoruba. And one thing that strikes me is in all of these languages, we don't have words for auntie, uncle, cousin.
True.
They're all mothers, fathers, brothers, and sisters. That speaks to the common. And as far as I'm aware, this same thing, this same mindset pervades all the way from Dhaka to Beijing, basically across the whole of Africa. So there's a fundamental cultural difference that plays into this. When again going back to the anchor story of the boy from Ghana, the discussion was I mean, as we talked about earlier, so it's very clear to us that the discussion involved his grandparents, and the conclusion was if this boy spoils, if this boy fails, it is all of us who have failed. It's not about just him. So in that respect, that's where an interesting dynamic comes in, because that thing of the system here holding you as a parent responsible when your child fails actually plays into our own cultural norm.
Mhm.
But at the same time, that same system is trying to give your child an individuality that is alien to us.
So what
Then
to do?
so what to do, and it brings us neatly to the second thing that I wanted to talk about, the personal dilemma. How should families navigate this without fracturing relationships? Because in my view, and very unfortunately, the relationship between that boy and his parents is fractured. I would stop just short of saying damaged. I would say fractured. And especially given that the boy went to that step of going all the way to the British Embassy or British Consulate, whatever the language in Accra, and then taking the whole thing legal. If the British Consulate not um, had not taken that step of hooking him up with an NGO to take his parents to court, the relationship would not have fractured to this extent. But now it is fractured. Can it be healed? Any fracture can be healed. Will it be healed properly? Now, it depends on how you set the fracture. But it now brings us to outcomes from the child. I know as an example that one of the boys who came back, so this is going back again 30 years, one of the boys who was brought back to join us in secondary school, and he came from the United States. His name is Efosa. He resented being brought back to Africa. The entire 3 years that he was with us, he never attempted to mix or he was basically just marking time. But the four other people, these two girls, two guys, they absolutely blended in. And I know for a fact, because one of them, I'm still quite good friends with one of them. He appreciated it. He says that those 3 years were instrumental in setting him on the right path. So even though at first he wasn't too happy, he shared the unhappiness, and basically blended with us. Never quite lost his American accent, but he blended very well with us, and he remains. Whenever we do reunions, he's always there. He's very, very well adjusted in the US now. Lives in Houston, has done very well for himself, and he says that it is that time spent in Nigeria that is responsible for the man that he is today. So I think, I think that parents sending their kids back to their mother countries is a nuclear option, but in many respects, it is a justifiable nuclear option when you see that as in when the matter don't when water don't pass Gary.
True.
I was looking for the English way of saying that I couldn't just find it. So
When you're
when water don't pass Gary,
when you're in over your head.
when you're weighing over your head, exactly, then that nuclear option is a very valid option. And it's an option that should be used. And it would be a tragedy if the court takes that option away.
Well, on that note, Cheta, I think we can draw a curtain on today's episode.
So we didn't come to talk about the spending review again.
No,
Chineke God.
that's true. Don't worry. Just keep your powder dry. We'll talk about it. Hopefully, if...
There were a lot of there are a lot of things I wanted to ask you hard questions about since you are the government and all. So you deliberately avoided it.
No. Cheta, you were so passionate about this topic that we could not get to it
come
on
on,
time.
stop it, my friend. Come on, stop massaging my ego.
All right, man. I'll see you on the next one.
See you on the next one. All right, bye.